start small. You don't need to drink the ocean. You don't need to tackle the world. I would say it's got to start with the passion of something that the leaders or the stakeholders can get excited about. So find something that maybe starts with a donated day of service. Maybe it starts, we're going to all as a team go volunteer at the Mission of Mercy event. Maybe we're going to see a veteran once a month, or we're going to something. And it may not even be dental related. I mean, some of the most fun I've seen is we're just going to go volunteer at the food bank. We're going to go do a fun run for whatever cause that is. So I think at the core of it, it's building that just culture of making it not about yourself.
Hey there, dental economist. If you're a dentist owner or a leader within a dental business thinking about growing production, case acceptance, patient and staff satisfaction, positive outcomes, and everything else that comes with running a dental business, then you're a dental economist. And you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Dental Economist Show. We're meeting at the intersection of profit and purpose as I sit down with dental leaders who share their stories about dentistry, business, and growth. Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Before we dive in, quick reminder, if you're enjoying the show, please be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment wherever you consume your podcasts. Your support helps us continue sharing valuable insights with dental professionals everywhere. So today, I'm very excited to welcome Kyle Guerin, a nationally recognized leader in corporate social responsibility and healthcare initiatives. Kyle is the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility at Henry Schein. A global health solutions company should not be a stranger to anyone listening to this podcast, and brings over 20 years of experience in marketing, nonprofit leadership, and purpose-driven programming. Before joining Henry Schein, Kyle led CSR efforts at Pacific Dental Services, where he also served as executive director of the PDS Foundation, spearheading initiatives that delivered over 250,000 volunteer hours and more than 86 million in donated dental care worldwide. That is significant impact. Kyle, very excited to have you on the show. How's everything going today?
It's great, Mike. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we dive into your work, specifics of your work in the dental industry, I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of what initially sparked your interest in dentistry. What was your journey? How did you end up here?
Yeah, Mike, I got to be honest, man. I wasn't this little boy growing up in outside Metro Detroit dreaming about working for a healthcare solutions company. Real quick, my journey was really, I wanted to be in sports, loved sports growing up in Metro Detroit, huge Pistons fan, Michigan State fan, and went to Michigan State, got a degree in marketing. Actually wanted to be a broadcast journalist, be on ESPN like we all did, but then I didn't want to move to Des Moines and work the morning shift. But got a degree in marketing, started, thought I had my dream job, worked for the Detroit Pistons in sales, realized I sucked at it. I was great at relationships, but that was the year Grant Hill left. Nobody wanted to buy these tickets, so I would give them away for free. Actually got fired from my first job, probably gave too many for free. Should have known philanthropy was my jam at that point.
That's right.
Went into work for event marketing, worked for Jeep, Chrysler, and Dodge at a large agency, really learned all the different segments of marketing. But again, it was relationships that I loved. Worked on some big scale events, experiential events. My parents were divorced. My dad lived out in Southern California. I hated the cold Michigan days. Always wanted, fell in love with the West Coast. Moved out to the West Coast. My dad had a small marketing consulting training company and actually was business partners with Coach John Wooden. So had developed this training curriculum based on the pyramid of success. And so, we worked with companies like Toyota and Infinity and In-N-Out Burger. But one of our customers was Pacific Dental Services. So this was 2004. My dad and the founder, Steve Thorne, had met at church. And Steve was growing his business to, where I think he was probably 70 offices at the time. And my dad was brought kind of some of his knowledge of performance improvement. And, we started helping Steve create their large conference, do some training for them. I really got to know the business and the leadership there. And after about 5 years. Love my dad. Him and I, working with families hard. But Steve wanted to, wanted to start this We Serve department, really focused around volunteerism and just growing he knew the impact that service had on his team members. And so, I didn't know a whole lot about CSR at that time, but I was a hype man. I describe myself as a dental hype man at heart. And I was good at rallying people. I took all the knowledge I had of big ideas and getting people excited about things. And so Steve gave me a chance, and that's how I ended up kind of in this space.
That's awesome. It's a great story. So I'd be curious because, you mentioned at the time, you didn't really know a lot about what CSR was or what it meant. How do you explain it to somebody today? If somebody else is looking and saying, what is this whole corporate social responsibility? Sometimes I think it sounds like a buzzword for large organizations, but there's so much importance to it in businesses of any size. So how would you go about sharing kind of what it means, why it's important, and how you find value in having that type of initiative in your work?
Yeah, I think the easiest, simplest way, and we use this phrase a lot at Henry Schein, but we didn't coin it. It's this idea of doing well by doing good. And ultimately, how I look at it is how you take care, of your people, how you take care of your communities, how you take care of society, ultimately leads how you're going to take care of the customer. So if you're doing and building in, I've spent a lot more of my career in kind of the volunteerism and the corporate philanthropy side of it. There's a whole sustainability side and an environmental side and taking care of the planet and taking care of how we do, equitable salaries and making sure it's fair trade and making sure, you're not sourcing products from areas that are creating sweatshops. But I've really spent the majority of my career around volunteerism. You hear a lot of buzzwords, like you said, Mike. You hear social impact, you hear philanthropy, you hear cause marketing, you hear a number of others. But how I really look at it is this idea of ultimately, if you do good as a business, you're going to do well, in the industry.
Yeah, so this maybe touches on this next question is, what is the connection between CSR initiatives and a company's bottom line? And it's kind of funny in your initial story, you're like, hey, I give away too many tickets, get fired from that first job. And there can be this perception of there being like a significant cost associated with CSR initiatives. And so when you're thinking about like how you balance what you should do and where you're driving value to doing well for others with, the health of the business, how do you think about that?
Yeah, one of my original mentors, Dr. Jack Dillenberg, and many people probably know Dr. Jack, who public health background, just an incredible, he always said, no margin, no mission. So you gotta, it's okay. We're all for-profit businesses and we've got to make money. But we also have this responsibility to make a difference in the world around us. Now, you should never go broke as a business giving away, all of your products, all of your services, all of your, you got to make a dollar. And none of us should have to apologize for that. But there is a balance. And some companies invest more in that. And maybe you get free, you give your team members 3 days to go volunteer at companies they want. Maybe you give big dollars away from your foundation. Maybe it's, gift in kind, that depending on your product. Maybe you encourage skill-based volunteering. I don't think there's a right or wrong formula. It's got to work for your culture. It's got to work for your brand. It's got to work, thankfully, when times and seasons when I've been at organizations, when obviously we're all businesses and sometimes business is better in certain seasons than others. I've never had to let go of people. I've never had to pull back on the philanthropy because if you're doing it right, it's so ingrained into the culture of your organization. And so you just find a way to do it. I think through all of it, COVID was a perfect example of, gosh, should we keep on the philanthropy guy? He's not driving business. Should we let him go? But, because it was so part of who we were, we kept it and kept giving just as much as we would have, pre or post COVID. So it's got to be built into who you are.
Yeah. No margin, no mission is a great statement. So let's dig into measurement for a little bit. how can a dental organization, a DSO, or really any company for that matter, measure the true impact of their CSR programs, both maybe in terms of like community benefit or financial outcomes? Are there metrics or benchmarks that you rely on when you're looking to get an understanding of the effectiveness of what you're putting out there?
Yeah, I think so often, especially in the dental care. I mean, the biggest one is donated services, right? I mean, our audience here, they're superheroes, right? They can do things that so few people can do. And I'd say all dentists have a responsibility one way or another, whether that's donating their services in their practices, whether that means, going to a Mission of Mercy or a RAM event or a community-based volunteer experience, or they decide they want to go overseas and do, an overseas missions trip. So, the metrics we're always looking at is patients served or, donated treatment or, but I think even more important that we really look at that I look at is, early in my career, so often it was like part of the adventure of going overseas and doing, you went in the remote areas and you hugged the baby and you took the pictures for Instagram. But then you started to really wonder, like, if you're only coming once a year, what happens to these patients beyond that? What happens to, the little girl that you had to pull 8 and 9, and now she goes the rest of her life with no front teeth? So I think what we try to see more and more is the sustainability of being able to not only advance and provide the necessary care, but how often are you coming back? Are you training and empowering dentists in that area? Are you teaching and working with dental schools that can grow the next generation of dentists that they can come back? So, when we look at some of the projects that we support at Henry Schein, the sustainability is so important. Now, I don't want to discourage people because even the people in the most rural areas need that care. But you have to think about beyond just going and pulling teeth and bailing, because are they better off than when you saw them?
Right, right. Yeah, the sustainability is key. I saw on LinkedIn that you were at the Smile Brands Leadership Summit this past weekend and doing some emceeing work there, which is awesome. I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are aware of the Smiles for Everyone Foundation that Steve built and the organization there have launched. And I heard him speak about that same thing where it was like, hey, look, you see this impact that you can have in the short period of time, but what happens if you can continue with that impact over a long period? And, I'd be curious I've heard him tell some great stories. One of them was like the discovery of an abscess in somebody that would have been just a terrible outcome if it was not found. Do you have any of those stories that you could share that were just kind of like those moments where you're like, what we're doing now really matters?
Man, that's like picking your favorite child.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them, and I'm a huge, the work that Steve is doing and the commitment that Smiles for Everyone Foundation has made and the outpost idea that they're doing, and even that they continue to grow, and where, they've said that they're committed to, hey, in these countries, we've got doctors and we've got products. And so early in my career, I got to go to Ethiopia was really where I caught the bug, not literally, but figuratively.
Sure.
But it was, we began working with McKellar University, the dental school. And it all started because of another nonprofit, Charity Water, that we got connected with, and we were providing people water. So then it was like, all right, well, we got them water, which is, again, that seems number one. And then you can get them out of health. And they connected us to another nonprofit, Rest, Relief Society to Gray. And they connected us to the university. And so it was like, if you don't have great partners all working together, it doesn't expand. But it got to be, because I was going so often, I got to meet, there were so many kids and there were so many people that I saw on a recurring basis, that whether that was, there was a little boy who was blind and had some special needs with Down syndrome. And we had the first time we were barely able to see him and provide the services. And then the next time, he had been seen a couple times by the dentist and at the hospital. And so then the next year when we came back, he was even more comfortable to be seen, and we were able to talk again. And I had taken a video on my phone and we were able to show him again. So it was just that because it wasn't so scary all that time, and then even in the remote area that we were doing in northern Tigray, we had hired a hygienist. We had through Henry Schein, they had, and that's kind of how I got connected to my role now at Henry Schein is because of those partnerships. We had donated chairs and had in this rural outpost had created an area that this community could go to. And we had hired a hygienist that was there on a regular basis. We'd work with the school so that those dental students would rotate through it. So it was expanding that care. I mean, we literally saw a woman give birth out in that area that they had to. So there wasn't, I mean, those abscess stories, absolutely. One of the Dr. Charles Rogers, he was one of the founding owner doctors. I mean, he literally saved this girl's life by being able to extract this tooth. And if he wasn't there, she would have died. And when he saw the relief from that mother that was able to pull that tooth, get the infection. I mean, how do you ever forget stories like that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fantastic. So you mentioned something earlier about how that we work in an industry filled with superheroes. You have these people that have the specialized skills and abilities that they've gone to lots of school for, lots of education, lots of time in the field. And one thing that I don't think is discussed all that much that probably could be highlighted more is just the willingness of dentists to be out there donating their time. And it does seem like within this community that there is something kind of embedded deep within where folks that go into dentistry have this desire to serve and to provide and realize the importance of giving back. Do you find that to be true? And, how do you all go about, driving some of these initiatives and getting the support from the community and getting dentists that want to participate?
Mike, I want to be careful how I answer this because I don't want to upset any dentists, but I think dentistry is such a hard career. It's tough on the body. It's tough. You're working in a small space. Like all of us would rather go spend money on anything but dentistry. So it's going to see the dentist is not our favorite thing. And I think when dentists can get back to why they the earlier they remember that they went into this as for helping and for patient care and for, one of my, again, a quote that always resonates is dentistry is fun when you can take the money out of it, when you're not asking people for case acceptance. And when you pull them back in, they get so busy. Dentists are, their schedule, they're growing their practices, they're doing CE units. So when they get back and they find and carve out the time and you get them back into remembering what they did for it, man, they're hooked. They're back doing it on a regular basis. They're going on trips every year or every other year. I think it's kind of letting them know that it's okay. Like your practice will be okay. You'll come back revitalized. You'll come back energized. Your staff will be excited. That when you can just get their attention and their focus on it, they are so willing to go and serve. And it literally, I mean, I can't say every time I see it, they're so energized and they get passionate about what they did because they're not worried about is insurance going to cover this or all the headaches that make this business so challenging. They remember why they went into it and it's about the patients, and that's the beauty of the profession.
Yeah. So what are some of the big initiatives that you're working on right now at Henry Schein?
We've got a program that we're really excited about. We call it our CARES package program because we get so many, and we love this, right? Because it means that people are off doing something and we try to support as many asks as we can. When it's a one-off, we can't, the ongoing care is tough because of, again, we're a business. We need to sell you a product for the ongoing care. But if you're going on a missions trip, you're doing a donate, if you're providing free care to those vulnerable populations, we want to show that we're supporting to that. So we've developed the CARES package program where we've got 6 kits, and it's a screening kit, it's an education kit, and it's a restorative kit. And we've also got some on the medical side too. It's not everything you would ever possibly dream. It might not be the shading you want or the composite material or the toothbrush, but we think this gets you through, what you would need. So, dentists can go online, they can apply for this, and, we want to be there. Some of our people hate it because we do so much more than gloves and masks. But, I look at a Henry Schein as we're the gloves and the masks protecting you while you're doing the work. And that's how we can come alongside that. We're working on a number of exciting just missions trips. We're working with Dr. Jonathan Levine and his Glow Good Foundation, which, Jonathan's got a beautiful practice in Manhattan, and he has some pretty high, I don't want to go too much HIPAA violations, but one of his patients, is Lenny Kravitz. And Lenny reached out to him to just do some really cool work in Eleuthera, Bahamas. And there were no dentists in Eleuthera. And Lenny, Lenny wasn't real focused on oral health as his, driving. He's a rock star, but now he wants to be a dentist. And one of the coolest things that we've been able to do with Dr. Levine and Lenny is, and a number of, NYU comes down there, and BU comes down there, and Nova comes down there. And we've really been able to keep this incredible, we transformed a community center, a little church building, to now not only do we have a full-fledged dental clinic with chairs and compressors and vacuums and mobile carts, but we've also created, through the help of Sprint Ray and other partners, we've got 3D printers down there. And literally, we're now printing dentures. I mean, last time I was down there, we had a CAD/CAM system down there, and we're printing crowns. And so, not only are we now extracting teeth, but now you're making it better, and you're giving them the smile that they need. And that's what's the next step on all these international missions. Now, sometimes you don't even have power to, you're having to makeshift sterilize, and you're using compressing or cold sterile. And I don't want to get into that. That's a whole different thing. But when you've got these kind of outposts, the next advancement is through these 3D printing and these opportunities is to really finish the work that's done. Whether you live in, rural Tanzania or you live in Orange County, nobody wants to be without their teeth. So it's just as important wherever you live to have a smile.
Well, it's very cool too, the technology that is coming out these days that makes that easier. Like you talk about the 3D printers and things like that. So explain to me a little bit how it works. If I am a dentist in the United States, I have my own private practice or part of a multi-location group, and I have a notion of philanthropy that I want to go pursue. You can reach out to Henry Schein and you have programs to help support those efforts. Is that a good way to think of this?
I would say we could connect the dots to trusted nonprofit partners.
Okay.
It is something we're toying with is how do we create some of these experiences for customers or for, our clinicians who want to do it, but that's not our expertise. We just have so many trusted partners that we select wherever you want to go, we can connect you to somebody in that space. You want to go to Jamaica? We've got, 1,000 Smiles, like we have so many partners and relationships and people we support through these philanthropic efforts. We can connect you to it. And, again, there's so many different things that go into it. It's really an art and a science that
100%.
We let the experts do what they're good at.
Yeah. So there's specific foundations and organizations that you all have kind of vetted that you understand to be the real deal, and they know what they're doing, and they're out there doing good work where you've kind of vetted like, yes, we will financially support these organizations. We will also tie and connect people into those organizations who have a willingness or a desire to go give back.
And we do most of our giving through gift in kind, through product donations is really where we do most of our giving. Because you hear these horror stories where people who are not trained and have no business providing healthcare and dentistry, it's like they pulled their kid's tooth out with a piece of, slam the door and they're now dentists. So they go to these countries and, I can do it. So we always want to make sure, again, the sustainability thing we talked about, we want to make sure they're working with the Ministry of Health. We want to make sure that they're doing all the things that guarantees that these patients, wherever they are around the world, are getting the kind of care that they deserve.
This is a little bit of an aside, but it's always shocking when you get your once every 4 to 6 month news article that comes across from somewhere random about the person that's practicing dentistry without a license or any training and the terrible outcomes that brings up. You're like, who would think that was a good idea?
No. Yeah.
So, yeah.
You see even people are doing surgeries and you're like, oh my gosh, Yeah. And we never want our name is connected to those groups.
No, please don't. So you guys do a lot of supply donations. What are some of the other things that, like, when you're looking at the future of CSR and you're like, hey, how do we continue to expand our efforts in the dental and the healthcare space? What are some of the things that you would love to see happen?
I think my biggest single passion is really in our kind of space is the advancement for oral healthcare for patients with intellectual or developmental disabilities. The special needs world is so underserved. The stats differ, but I think there's around somewhere between 57 and 60 million individuals with a disability, and they say their number one need is access to oral health care. And it's a number of reasons. And we know it, right? It's the reimbursements aren't there. It takes more time. It's challenging. A lot of clinicians don't feel like they're trained for it. And so it just is referral after referral, just trying to send people. And when you've met a number, and I had the pleasure, part of my role with Pacific Dental and their foundation was opening up a special needs clinic in kind of your backyard in Arizona. And so the stories that come out of that and the need that comes out of that, where people are driving 4-6 hours to just the desperation of getting their patients seen. So we've got a couple of things with the Institute for Exceptional Care that we're working on trying to roll out some opportunities of trying to make this as easy as possible and tackling the people and those challenges that come out. But the AADMD, the Special Care Dental Association, I mean, that is within our profession. It just is heartbreaking that an individual just simply can't find clinicians that are willing to see them. And so that, in my personal, that's the biggest opportunity that I'd like to see grow.
I think one of the things that CSR has the ability to do in an organization is really shape the culture. And I had on our podcast last year at some point, Dr. Jan Jaffer, he's with Trek Dental. Trek is actually an acronym for their core company values, and they do international trips and do a lot of things that are close to home. What sort of benefits would you share with somebody who's thinking about implementing their own CSR program within their organization?
I would say a couple things. One is you'd start small. You don't need to drink the ocean. You don't need to tackle the world. I would say it's got to start with the passion of something that the leaders or the stakeholders can get excited about. So find something that maybe starts with a donated day of service. Maybe it starts, we're going to all as a team go volunteer at the Mission of Mercy event. Maybe we're going to see a veteran once a month, or we're going to something. And it may not even be dental related. I mean, some of the most fun I've seen is we're just going to go volunteer at the food bank. We're going to go do a fun run for whatever cause that is. So I think at the core of it, it's building that just culture of making it not about yourself. And that's what, humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And so when you can take that onus, I like to use this analogy of the t-shirt, right? If you've ever volunteered, Mike, you show up, you put on your volunteer t-shirt, and you're willing to do whatever it takes, right? You're the nicest guy, you're carrying trash, you're picking up a beach, you're picking up a playground. You do whatever it takes to, serve in that moment. But the second we take that t-shirt off, we're back being annoyed that somebody just cut us off on the road. We're back being annoyed that Starbucks line is too long. We're back being annoyed that, the dental assistant didn't have my perfect tray set up, And if we can be who we are when we're wearing the t-shirt, if we can be that all the time, that's the humans that we want to be. And that translates to how you run your business, how you treat your family, how you treat your friends, the human being. I mean, I'm reminded of this most probably like you when I travel, because I'm the worst version of myself when I'm at the airport, when I'm getting on and off the plane. So I've tried to be like, saying nice things to thank you to the pilot when you get off. So I'm all over the place, Mike. But what I'd say is start small, but make it repetitive, repetition to where you do it, it becomes what you do and you stick with it. Don't always keep changing. Like this month, we're going to support this month, we're going to support that. It takes time to really get connected to a cause, to understand what you're doing. for other people, we may have it, if you're super passionate about veterans and you're all in this, it may take a while to get the rest of your team on board, or it may take the rest a while. PDS, Charity Water is still there, and we fought for it because, it takes time as you got new people coming in and you got new people going out, and you got to keep building it. And then it becomes just part of your culture and your core. And that's what makes it great.
Isn't consistency the secret to so much in life? And thanking the pilot, I mean, as long as the landing's good. I mean, look, if you're going to bounce me down the runway when we get there, or those one, like the real smack ones, and I think most of the time when that happens, they don't actually open their door until everybody gets off the plane. But yes, saying nice things, probably some good advice.
Brother, they got you there alive. You're still alive.
This is
they landed
true.
the plane.
This is true.
It's all perspective.
The plane that landed upside down, I guess they still were there. They were all safe. So
they still made it. Yeah.
That's right. If you are facing skepticism or resistance from leadership or staff internally about launching some of these initiatives, how would you go about kind of winning them over, bringing them to the side of like, this is worthwhile endeavor for us to pursue?
Yeah, the first one is you always have to give with an open hand, I like to say, because, so often when you do donated days and you may reach out to patients, and man, they may roll in with an Escalade, and they may roll in with a Coach bag, or they may roll in like, you don't know that they needed it. You don't know that maybe they, somebody shows up the RAM event. If they're willing to take advantage of it, they must need it in some way. So you can't judge it, because it's about, if you make it that, hey, I'm giving, I'm serving, and not that it should always be about you, but you're helping someone else. And if you can get that through your mind, it kind of eliminates a little bit of the skepticism. But then I'd also say, every trip I've been on, everything, you never see that it's a waste of time. And so I think you're never going to go poor by giving. And I think that idea that if you start small and you don't do more than bite off more than you can chew, you're going to see the value in it. You're going to be looked at in a positive way. I think there's some stat, somewhere that says, people are less likely to complain when a company is associated with a good cause. Usually you have grace for Southwest Airlines because they're nice people, even though, I don't know, like you, I'd fly there to Phoenix. It's late every time, Vegas too. So, but you have a little more grace for them because you feel like they're a good company. And I think that's where it's never going to be a negative outlook on your brand. And if you can do good and you can help the people, they're always going to think favorably of you.
Yeah, I think it's also important for, I've read some studies that the younger generation, now I'm going to sound like the old man that I'm turning into, but those in their 20s also seek out employment at places that have, a purpose.
Yeah.
That they aren't just looking to do the everyday work, but they want to be attached to something that they feel has a higher value or a higher purpose. And so, that's maybe an additional benefit from recruiting retention perspective as, companies continue to seek to bring in, the best and brightest that they can find out there.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we all want to do something that matters, and when you can be connected to, and so often, even when you work at a company that does all these great things, you maybe have never done one thing. You maybe haven't volunteered, you haven't given, but you're happy to tell people that, oh, my company did A, B, and C. And you'll share that on your LinkedIn. You'll share that with other people. And then people notice you for something other than, our stock prices are high or whatever that is. I mean, it's something that people can be proud of, and it's attractive.
Yeah, we started doing service days, like surrounded by offices. We have kind of different offices across the country. It's just an awesome time to get out of the office and spend some time with colleagues and go do something and do the giving back. And I think even after they take the shirt off, that warm fuzzy feeling lasts for a while.
Yeah.
And they still end up being things that people talk about in a positive light. Like, when are we going to do this again? Like, it's just a really great morale builder. I think people feel good when they're giving back.
Yeah. The stories of going and doing volunteering are usually way better than the corporate happy hour and the things that are less positive. So you're way better off investing in the volunteer day than the happy hour.
Yeah, when you're looking at just kind of business in general, are there any companies that you look at that you just have kind of a lot of respect for the way that they do their CSR initiatives, maybe, outside of the dental space, but other examples where you go like, these people really get it right?
I love Warby Parker. I love who they are as an organization, of how they, what they do, how they treat their people, how they donate to the products. Patagonia is another one, of how they care for the environment, how they'll, even close down some of their stores. They want people to be outside. There's so many. I mean, even the old school Toms that used to, the one for one
Yeah.
movements of, there's, Southwest is another one. I know, Nike has really put a stake in the ground in so many of the Dick's Sporting Goods of, helping play. And I love when they can align with some of the things that they do.
Right.
That connects to, Dick's Sporting Goods, where they want to help kids get out and play, and they want to have sports. And so, there's a lot of groups doing just some really cool things.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you go to learn when you're thinking of professional growth for yourself and continued professional development? What are some of the things that you do, to stay on top of the latest trends and movements that are taking place in your work?
Yeah, it's interesting being in this space, because usually when people reach out to you, they either want a job or a donation, right?
Sure.
So people are a little guarded, which is sometimes hard, because, a lot of times it's, you want to just talk shop. Like, I'm not looking for a job, or I like my job, I want to stay. So, there's some great conferences, Engage for Good. I'm part of a group called the Conference Board, which is a great, Boston College has a great program. I think it's the ACCP, but a lot of it is just that networking that, you get to know someone. One of my best friends, we went and got our masters together, runs the In-N-Out Foundation. And him and I taught In-N-Out Burger for you,
Yeah.
West Coasters. And him and I just love, we just talk shop a lot, because we do very, In-N-Out is very focused on adoption and abused children, and the work I'm doing in dentistry. And so, but there's so many similarities. It's like, well, how do you tackle this? How do you tackle that? And so many of our companies are so different that, it's just much like everywhere else. You get conferences. I'm a relationship guy. I'm a connector. Man, that's why I saw you out, Mike. I was like, I like what Mike's doing.
Yeah.
Him and I need to be friends. So I mean, LinkedIn is such a cool tool. And I always say, don't be afraid to just friend somebody, but then don't always try to sell me something. Try to sell me friendship. Try to sell me like just connecting as humans. Like,
Right.
I don't want your training curriculum. I'm not going to respond. But if you just want to talk shop, talk business, talk life, let's go be friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The instant LinkedIn connect, let me give you my sales pitch, is very tiresome these days. But when it's like, hey, should we have a conversation? I know you reached out and was like, hey, should we have a conversation? I was like, I would love to. This sounds great. So yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah.
Before we wrap, what's something that makes you very bullish about dental? Something where you think like this is an industry that is, only going up from here.
I think when we look at the percent of people who still aren't going to the dentist, I think I heard someone say it's still, I think it was Steve Bilt that gave that quote. I mean, I think he said 25 years or 30 years when I started, 50% of people weren't going to the dentist. And he said, it's still at about 50%. And so when you think people want to have their teeth, people need to have their teeth. And that idea that people still, there is so many patients for everyone if they care for them. And I think that's one of the pieces. But the even more exciting is, I think, all the work that's going and being done with the oral health connected, the mouth connected to the rest of the body, and realizing how important periodontal disease is to your heart and to diabetes, and how I think that now it's swinging back to being, these are the doctors of the mouth. And this is so important. I mean, sadly, I'm embarrassed to say, but I had to get a tooth extracted, and it was, and they did a CBCT on me, and they could see how my sinus was just, so stuffed that the doctor, like, you need to go see your ENT. And
Right.
Just so that it wasn't just like, well, we got the tooth, good luck. It was so connected to my overall health, and how that piece. And that's only going to get better when you see point of care testing and salivary diagnostics and all these other pieces that really show, man, I mean, dentistry it's safe. It's not going anywhere. We want to have our teeth. That's never going to change.
Yeah, lots of great innovation taking place. Kyle, thank you so much for spending the time. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun learning about your world. This is a conversation that I haven't had with folks in the past. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I know this is different than the normal profitable dentistry of things, but man, this is winning the heart, brother. So this will grow your practice as well.
Absolutely. Love it.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS, home of Dental OS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening.